Alright, I wanted to do a quick video just to explain an issue that I've had a lot of people ask me about in recent days and weeks. It's something I've seen a lot over time, so hopefully if you run into this issue, or if you're in the position of helping other people or training other people on how to use Power Automate, this will help you explain things in a way that might make some sense to them. So the bottom line is I have a lot of people who want to use Microsoft Forms as a way of collecting data and then drop that data into a SharePoint list or an Excel spreadsheet or do something else with it. And they get a little frustrated because they'll build a flow using the when a new response is submitted trigger, which I've done here. And I'm just going to open this edit window. So I've got when a new response is submitted to this demo app issue reporter form. I want to do something. I want to create an item in a SharePoint list, or I want to create a, whatever the case is. Bottom line is I want to do something with the data from that form. Now the problem you run into is that when you start building your flow, I'm just using a compose here as an example, but if I were to say, create an item in a SharePoint list, I'd have the same issue where when I go to my dynamic content selector, I'm only seeing 3 values from that trigger. I'm seeing a response ID, a resource data, whatever that is, and I'm seeing the body. And I'm not sure what the response ID, that kind of makes sense. It's the ID number or the ID identifier for that response. And in fact, if you read the explanation here, it says use with get response details action to fetch the content of the form response. So if people, if you just kind of read the little hint text there, it would tell you what you need to do. But a lot of times people don't notice that. It's fine, we're all busy, so that's why we have these videos. But basically, in order to actually get the data, if I jump over to that form itself, we'll see that I've got a bunch of questions here. I've got 7 questions of all different types. So I have data coming into that form. Why am I not seeing it in as available to use from that trigger action? The reason is that the trigger action is just sort of a notification. There's a webhook out there. When that form response comes in and says, hey, form response just came in for this app. Is there a flow running that needs to do something with that? If so, go do your thing. So all it's sending over is the bare minimum of information that the trigger needs to identify that response, which is the response ID. The body is kind of, that's just how it collects the data, or how it presents the data. So if I want to actually do something with the data, with the response data from the form, I need to add another step here called get response details. And again, a lot of people say they start doing this and then they're not sure they're doing the right thing because it seems redundant. Why do I need to tell it which form it is again? It would be great if this could kind of trigger, if it knew that, could detect that the response or the trigger for the flow was when a new response is submitted and just point to that form. That would be fantastic, but that's not how it works. So what I need to do is essentially make sure that I'm selecting the same form, and then I can use that response ID from the trigger. So now if I were to, and again I'm just going to use a compose step, but you get the idea. If I were creating a SharePoint list item, I would see the same kind of behavior here. But when I go into the inputs field for this other compose, from that get response details, there I have the data from that form response. So I have the answers to all 7 questions on that form, at least the ones that were answered. So this is really what you need to do, whatever you're working, essentially this trigger and this action should always be there together as a pair. If you're using that trigger, then that action has to be in the flow if you want to get the data from from the actual response data from the form. You'll see there's a similar kind of pattern with some of the other triggers, particularly the SharePoint triggers, and I'm saying particularly those because those are the ones I work with most often. Where if you create a flow using the when an item is created or when a file is created, or even for a selected item or for a selected file, the trigger itself is not returning all of the data from, if it's when a list item is created, it's not returning necessarily in all cases all of the details of that list item, all of the properties of it. So likewise, whenever I use that for a selected item or when an item is created trigger, I back it up or pair it up with the get item action in order to actually get the data, get the properties, the column values from that list item, so then I can do whatever I need to do with them. So just understand that the trigger is the action that starts the process, but it doesn't give the flow all of the information it needs to do what you want it to do. So you very often have to use these get actions, whether it's get response details or get item or get file metadata or get file properties. Whatever the case is, you need to use those get actions to actually pull the data that you want into your flow before you can do stuff with it. So hopefully this was helpful. Really quick and probably one of the shortest videos I've ever done, but I think something it's really fundamental, but a lot of people overlook as they're starting to use this product. So hopefully it was helpful. Please leave a comment and let me know what you think.